Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening. I know we got a special meeting squeezed in here before we go on break, so thank you for all of those that participate in person, and I'm sure we have 36 people right now on Zoom. We also have Dr. Adley, Julie Best, and Dave Brown on Zoom also, so thank you all for joining. I would like to call this special meeting of the Board of Education to order. The next regular Board of Education meeting will be held on Wednesday, March 2nd at 7:30 p.m. in the board meeting room. The only chairman's remarks I will make is that Jill McCammon and I just finished attending the first kickoff of the Hindley Homes and Royal Building Committee over in Town Hall. The committee has been seated. Rusty Schreiner, Kip Coons, and I presented a book that kind of goes over all the details and get them kickstarted. So, you know, the renovation of those schools and the removal of the portables is on the way. Great group of volunteers have stepped up. So we'll get organized a list of those folks so you know who they are. So we kick that meeting off at 5 this afternoon. I will turn it over to you, Dr. Adley.
Oh, Dr. Adley, you're on mute.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see everybody remotely, and thank you for coming together at very short notice. I thought it was important that we do so. There's a number of school districts that are indicating kind of their intention at this particular point. Our community has been patient. The board had indicated a desire to come together and take a vote on this particular matter, and it's also helpful as we prepare our staff to receive our students on the 28th. Should the board decide to do an optional mask wearing decision. So with that, I do want to thank Dr. Kennefack, David Knopf, our health director, and Emily Merritt, our COVID compliance officer and school nurse, for all of their work over the past 2 years or so, and particularly also as we come down the stretch here and helping us through this phase. As you know, the Department of Public Health and the State Department of Education said that they would come out with guidelines and recommendations. We did meet with them on Tuesday morning as a superintendent group, and there was no updates at that particular point, nor did they indicate when an update would be forthcoming. With that, the medical team met and made some recommendations, and I would like just to very, very quickly just go through those. And again, Dr. Kennefack, David, and Emily are here online if the board has any questions. So with that, I'm going to go through very quickly just some of the data that allows us to make the decision or recommendation moving forward. I've also just given you a wee update that just momentarily we got an email from the State Department of Public Health or State Department of Education that said tomorrow morning we will be discussing a draft of a document. So I'm not quite sure what that means, but it's a wee bit more encouraging than half an hour ago. So that's the latest, literally the latest. But with that, we will be on that call in the morning. If there's any changes, I think we can. We're adept at making those changes very quickly. So we'll do that. And if there's any changes to what we discussed tonight or what the board agrees on, certainly we'll make that known and react accordingly. So just want to talk about real quickly here, and we'll get our other medical advisors on very quickly. In making a decision or recommendation, it is done so with a significant decline in the COVID cases that we've experienced, particularly over the last month. The high vaccination rates of our students, staff, and community. We've over 90, nearly 100% on the staff in the community, and the students, particularly of middle school, high school age, the younger kids, minimally are at 55 or above. In fact, we know that it's above that 55 mark. The hospitalization, the pressure on hospitalization or lack thereof, and the lack of spread in schools, and rather low acuity of the illnesses that are experienced. And again, I won't speak for my medical advisors, they can speak to those particular issues. Michelle, can you just move the slide, please? You can see here, right here, from how this has dramatically dropped from week to week here at the moment. And just go on to the town. So So once again, from January, there's been a steady decline, the decline in the weekly number of cases that we have. So we're really down to, particularly in the school setting, a handful of cases each day. Michelle, just move forward, please. So this is familiar to people, and has also changed. We were 126, 102, 77, and the most latest one is the number of cases is 77. The rate, I believe the rate that we were the last presentation was 33.5 per 100,000 community members. It's now down to 25.3. It's still red because the red way back when we started these metrics, the red was 15 cases per 100,000. But you can probably see then we've learned to live in a different sort of environment. Michelle, could you just move forward, please? So these assuming if the board were to approve an optional mask wearing policy, these I'm calling them mitigation, but they're really just updates on kind of our reactions to the practices that we've had in place. But just to go through real quickly, there'll be an optional mask wearing pre-K through 12, no contact tracing. Now, some of these have already been in place, but some of them will be a slight modification. Regular lunches, that's already in place. Quarantining for COVID cases only. COVID cases return to school on day 6 with masks, 10 days without. Social distance restrictions, they only would be lifted except for anyone who's coming back after day 5. The athletes would return day 5 with no medical note necessary. So those are real quickly the practices that would be put in place. Michelle, go ahead, please. And very quickly, the medical teams are recommending mask wearing and the option for staff and students to choose. They are here. If you have any questions, we can answer those. I suggested a possible motion to the board to consider to adopt optional mask wearing effective February 28th for students, staff, and visitors when on the grounds of Darien Public Schools. And that would try and encompass inside the school, outside the school for athletes, the central services building, and future board meetings, perhaps. With that, Mr. Chairman, that's a quick run through of why we're here this evening and kind of the possible motion that we might consider and what would be in place for the children as they come back on the 28th if they were coming back in a different setting. The staff, I do want to say the staff have been working and are prepared to receive our students back with talking points, and so that includes classroom teachers, coaches, administrators. It's important that the students are arrived back in a supportive way, and nurturing way, and a respectful way that would honor people who are wearing masks, whether they're students or whether they're adults. Mr. Chairman, I'll hand it over to you, sir. Just if you want to open the floor to any of our medical team, they might do that, or if there's any questions.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Adley, and thank you to the medical team that's on the call this evening. We appreciate you being here. So with that, I will open it up to board questions. Mr. Sini.
I'd like to make the motion right off the bat, and then we can have discussion if that's okay with you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
So I'd like to make the motion to adopt the optional mask wearing effective Monday, February 28th for students, staff, and visitors when on the grounds of Darien Public Schools.
Do I have a second? Mrs. Ockman. Conversation, questions. Mrs. Ockman.
So I have a procedural question but first a question
Sure.
for the medical team. It says the district medical team recommends mask wearing and the option for staff and students to choose. It just seems a funny way to say it. So I guess if the board is being asked to vote, and we're not the medical team, are you comfortable with optional mask wearing in school?
I'll take first stab at that. And the answer,
Yeah,
David, we can barely hear you. Do you have a sound button there? Thank you so much.
how's that? Is that better?
A little better. If you could speak up a little more, be helpful. Thank you.
I'll try again.
Perfect, perfect.
Technology is not my strong suit. Town Hall went to optional mask wearing a few weeks ago. And I think that we're in good position to have mask wearing be optional in the schools. The reason that I say recommended is because that is the position of CDC, and that's the position of the state health department. So, I'd like to encourage those who aren't certain, is really kind of the way I'd like to phrase this, that if anybody's not certain and not comfortable, they should wear a mask. And I think maybe if we say instead of recommended, we can say for anyone who's not sure and isn't particularly comfortable, they should wear a mask. And I think that we also need to make people feel comfortable with wearing a mask if they choose to. I don't want to have it turn around and have it be that people will be, criticized or ostracized. We're in kind of a weird political time with that right now. And, I'd hate to have someone who feels more comfortable wearing a mask, be in a situation where they're made to feel uncomfortable because they need to wear a mask or want to. So that's where the recommended comes from.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I can echo
Dr.
David's
I think
opinion.
Dr. Kennefic is answering.
Sure.
Yeah, I can echo David's opinion. I think of all the towns in the state, Darien is well positioned to drop the mask mandate. We have a very high vaccination rate, even amongst kids. It's in the 5 to 11. It's not quite as high as the rest of the age brackets, which are in some cases 100%, but it's still much higher than the rest of the state. And case rates are dropping after a very precipitously after a very high level. I haven't seen case positivities ever in the pandemic like we saw over the holidays, basically. But, if people ask me what I recommend, to an individual, all things being equal, if you want to wear a mask because it does, cut down on transmission and it does reduce risk. But the risk is very small now. And I think it's really up to individuals to weigh that risk because everyone has a different situation in their home and with their own health. And I think we have to be supportive of people who have issues, either kids with risk factors or family members with risk factors. And we have to be supportive and respectful of those people's choices if they're not ready to stop masking. Certainly mask use in the town is still very high, at least in the retail settings. Almost everywhere we go, we see people still wearing masks in the community. So obviously people are somewhat comfortable with it. So for those who don't want to, I think the risk is very, very small to those people and the rest of the community. And we're at an auspicious time, if there has been one in the pandemic, where rates are dropping, people are vaccinated, the weather is tending towards spring. The only caveat I'd put out there is this virus is very unpredictable. And though it's become somewhat less virulent, though much more transmissible with the latest variant, that could change. And so we still have to be a little bit vigilant because should the virus change to become more virulent, we might have to sort of relook at things. I think the chances of that are relatively small. But it's a possibility because the one thing we've learned about coronavirus is we can't predict its behavior very well. So that is my opinion.
Thank you very much. Emily, anything you wanted to add? Your day-to-day on the ground in the schools, and thank you for all that you've been doing with Alicia out.
You're welcome, but it's been really positive working with this team, and I think we're just looking at the data, and I think the data looks really good. And I think we would not make this recommendation if altogether we didn't feel like this was weighing the risks and the benefits. And there certainly are benefits. We all feel like this is a really good next step, and it's a positive step. And I think we're all feeling like this is the direction we want to go in, and we're looking forward to that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Additional board questions? Mrs. McCammon.
I just have one technical question. I'm excited to see the data, look how it looks, but I'm curious to understand, maybe I'm just not reading it correctly. COVID cases return to school on day 6 with mask, and then we have athletes return after 5 days. What's the difference?
It's Actually, it's just semantics the way it's written down there. Basically, people who come back, both of them could be coming back after day 5.
Thank you.
Could you say that?
And it's possible that may change. The reason those are staying the same, that's the current guidance from DPH, so we have to follow it. It's very likely that that could change, and if it does, we'll let you know. We're not holding our breath, however, for a prompt response. So,
Thank you.
And just to clarify, so that there's been a question about day 5 and day 6. So we're calculating all this on day 0 being either a date of a positive test or first symptoms based on whatever comes first. So if it's day 0 is January 1, we're going, January 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is when they return. So that's when we mean by isolating through day 5, returning on day 6.
Thank you. Mrs. Worm.
It was the exact same questions.
Oh, good. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Mrs. Best, Mr. Brown? Mrs. Best? The mute button, Julie.
Miss Best, you are still, oh, give me a second. Can you unmute now?
Can you unmute now, Julie? There you go.
Now I can. Well done.
You're gonna have
Don't
to
give me the power to unmute myself.
speak up, Julie, please.
Oh,
Thank you.
sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the discussion. I just would love to hear a tiny bit more about the preparation for faculty and staff to receive the kids on the 28th with a new optional mask policy, to make sure that everybody, whatever their comfort level is feeling comfortable in the room. Can we just hear a titch more on that, please?
Yes, Julie, thank you. And it's really just, the talking points are just, they literally have developed some, I'll call it a script, but talking points in terms of developmentally, whatever the age happens to be, of how they're going to communicate, because there are students and there are staff, some who want to and some who have to perhaps, right, wear masks. So it's just built around that we're in a different situation, and there will be people who have masks and so on and so forth, and that we treat each other respectfully. Even simple things like, just as an example, that we don't say, it's great to see everybody's faces when we're not going to have some kids. So it's that type of sort of message, and being sensitive and just respectful to each other. And we've done that with through support with our school psychologists and our administrative team.
Thank you. Mr. Brown.
And just to clarify, so every one of our schools have now had a meeting or will have a meeting prior to next week in preparation, whatever the decision is made tonight. And this meeting was with all the faculty and all the staff, and explaining, or talking through all these things, so questions that might come up and the concerns that might come up. And we've also taken particular interest with medically fragile children, and how we can make those families comfortable with the decision and any accommodations that we can make. So we're working a lot with the special education team and so on. So we just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, and that it doesn't feel like we're just being thrown into a new situation.
Thank you, Emily.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
If I may, I just didn't hear myself mention the buses. I don't know if it skipped over it or it was on the list or not, but the buses, the students currently will, because it's essentially a federal mandate, whether you're on school transportation, they will have to wear the mask during that time period.
Thank you, Dr. Adley. Mr. Brown, did you have your hand up? No? Okay, good. Mrs. Best. Mrs. Parent.
Thank you.
Look at this.
I just wanted to extend the thought that Dr. Adley was sharing about everybody being respectful of everybody's choices. I think that not only does that pertain to this student in the schools, but it also pertains to the entire community and the parent population.
Mike.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. I was just asking that everybody be respectful of everybody, not just students in the schools and teachers in the schools, but parents also being respectful to teachers' choices and students' choices. And just this is a nebulous idea, and it's we just need to be flexible and be respectful of everybody. So I just ask that as a community, we work together with this.
Thank you, Mrs. Parent. Mrs. Achman.
So I just have a procedural question, because it sounds like we're all there. to move forward. The motion, and not to be technical, I don't understand. I was just looking at our policies to adopt optional mask wearing. I think what we're doing is letting go of the mandate. And I think the only thing we're doing is revising that, like, face coverings can't be worn in school. What we're saying is you can. So I don't know that we need to adopt optional mask wearing, because that was always an option, as much as we need to support rescinding mandatory mask wearing. Does that make sense?
I don't think we have to actually rescind because the mandate is gone. So under our policy where it says, for any protocols that are not health and safety mandates, we just have to look at recommendations for review, input, and possible action. So we may need to tweak the wording. But
Yeah.
I don't
So-
think that.
I think that since this is falling under health and safety, right, I'm happy to take a vote. I personally don't know that we even need to. What we're saying is we're going to optional mask mandate, optional mask wearing, because we are not imposing a local mandate on it.
Right.
But I don't know that we need to adopt optional mask wearing.
You
Should
can
it,
accept
should
it.
it be, may I have a motion to move to optional mask wearing? Or what did you just say, Jill? Accept?
Yeah, I think the only thing that precludes us right now from doing anything, because quite frankly, you could wear it, is we do have a policy that talks about your face can't be covered at school. Head covering's okay, but faces can't. So we could probably say, the acceptance of students to wear masks during the pandemic, should they feel comfortable. I mean, you could make it affirmative, but it's not a mandate. And I don't know that we're adopting optional mask wearing.
Do you want a motion to amend it to accept optional mask wearing?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. I just don't know that we're adopting.
Can you repeat that, please?
So you're going to make a motion to amend it to read
I would say something like,
to accept.
to allow for optional mask wearing effective Monday, February 28th. Because we're not adopting mask wearing as a system. What we're accepting is that if someone feels at this moment in time, still in the pandemic, under health and safety, that they want to, that's fine. We're just not mandating it.
So may I have a motion to
So what you're
allow-
saying also is that right now, we don't need to be wearing these because it's no longer mandated, right? Is that the point?
No, what I'm
We're
trying to
getting
make a carve out for, and this is why, it's just if you know the if you know the policies down deep, we do have a policy that
Right.
if let's say everyone declares COVID over, the school district might not want kids in school covering their faces. And so what I don't want to do is adopt optional mask wearing, because a year from now, we might not. But in this environment, we accept optional mask wearing as a mitigation factor. I liked Jill's accept optional mask wearing, because I don't want to do 2 years down the road, end up in a fight with someone having their face covered and being like, you adopted mask wearing at school.
But you accepting is adopting it. I don't see the difference in the language, actually. But I don't want to, let's get going. If you want to change the words,
So I'll
make the
second.
motion. Yes.
I'll second the amendment.
Thank you.
Okay.
And then you have to vote on the,
All those-
All in
Amendment.
favor of the amendment? That is unanimous. All right. So we have a second. And so can we move forward with all those in favor of a motion to accept optional mask wearing effective Monday, February 28th for students, staff, and visitors when on the grounds of the Darien Public Schools? All those in favor?
and these are part of our COVID policies?
Yeah.
So these will sunset at some
Sunset,
point.
Yep. So that is unanimous. All right, good. So we're there. All right, thank you all for the conversation around that. And thank you all for the public for all the emails and thoughts and comments on this. So our students will return with the optional mask wearing effective Monday, February 28th. We'll move on to public comments.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
if I may, just if we're fortunate enough to receive any other feedback from
yep,
DPH or Department of Education, we'll go ahead and modify some of those practices that we would have in place. I see no intent that they would come back with changing the optional mask wearing opportunity. But if there's minor modifications, we will go ahead and modify those. So I'm going to hold off on a communication to parents until at least tomorrow morning's meeting takes place, because it may result in some minor modifications.
Good, thank you. Michelle, we'll move to public comment.
Good evening. For participants in person, please wait for the chairperson to acknowledge and call each participant to the microphone. For participants via Zoom, please click the raise hand option. The facilitator will acknowledge and unmute each participant. For all participants, please state your name and address for the record log. Each participant will have up to 3 minutes to comment. Mr. Brown, you still have your hand raised. Do you want to comment?
Go ahead, Mr. Brown.
You're unmuted, Mr. Brown.
Thank you. Finally, appreciate that. Real quick, just a quick question, Alan. We just voted on a motion. So if you're going to make any changes tomorrow in response to something, would we have to vote again? I'm just not sure what the.
No, these will be more, the whole way through, the board has understood that the medical team has been responsive to the practices. Certainly, if we come back and would change the acceptance of the optional mask wearing, that would be different. Don't see that on the cards, but it may just be some of those things that, if they do come out with something about not having buses, then we would just go ahead and do that. Or if it's a spacing issue or something else that they recommend or require, when they recommend, we have the option not to do that. So I don't see the need to come back and do that, because the whole way along we've been making minor modifications, just in implementation of the practices.
Okay, so as long as the scope doesn't go outside of what we just passed, we're good.
Correct. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Alan.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Michelle, we'll start with people in the audience. Anyone wishing to speak? Okay, thank you. Michelle, we'll move over to friends on Zoom.
Curtis Butler, you are unmuted and recognized.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you for taking my question. I'm less familiar with procedure, but I am a little surprised that the vote was taken before public comment. That aside, I think I share the view that we would like to end mask wearing in our community and across the nation. I think the 2-year frustration has been enough. That said, I'm rather surprised by the unanimous approval of the timing of February 28th, largely because February 28th coincides with the return from a 10-day school break. The last 10-day school break we had was 6 weeks ago. And in the week during the break and the week back at school, when students were still wearing masks, over 400 cases were reported in the schools. So it seems to me we are absolutely begging for a repeat of that experience, especially without students wearing masks. And my hope would be we would pursue this policy, but delay it by 2 weeks so that we don't suffer the exact same experience we had only 6 weeks ago. Because the incidence of this and the pervasiveness of COVID across the nation hasn't really changed in 6 weeks. We're just seeing a lull right now because no one's traveling. As soon as they travel, it's back. The other point is, I was surprised to hear the discussion among adults saying we need to respect those in the schools who choose to wear masks. That is not, frankly, recognize the behavioral characteristics of school-age kids, meaning they're entirely peer pressure driven. They do not want to stand out. So the idea that kids will happily wear masks to school because their parents ask them to, when other kids are not, is incredibly unrealistic for most of us who have children. So I'm a little bit surprised by both of these, but my ask would be, unless we want a repeat of the numbers we saw in early January, which, as I said, we glossed over pretty quickly on that chart, but they exceeded 400 in less than 2 weeks. And it's pretty likely we're going to see another spike if the day they come back from break, we allow them not to wear masks. Thank you.
Mr. Butler, could we just have your address, please, for the record?
Yes, so Curtis Butler, member of the RTM and RTM Education Committee, 137 Hollow Tree Ridge Road.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking this evening.
Alicia Skinner, you are unmuted and recognized.
Hi, Alicia Skinner. Cliff Avenue. Thank you so much for the vote that you guys made today. I truly appreciate it. I know that we've had lots of discussion around this point for some time, and I appreciate the option of wearing a mask. My question is around the bus situation, and I'm not sure that you guys can answer the question at this point in time. It feels like it's outside of your control, but it is very confusing, I think, for children, particularly, kindergartners, the youngest learners, to say, okay, you have to get on a bus and you have to wear a mask, but then please take off the mask, put it somewhere where it's going to remain clean. And then, in school, you don't have to wear a mask. And then remember, please put on the mask to come on back on the bus. So I don't know if there's a time, like when do we address the bus situation, or is there a timeline outlined for that? I don't know if you guys can answer that at this point in time, or if that's still something that's outside of your control, but it is a little bit confusing, I think, particularly for the children, to tell them to put on a mask, but then take it off, but then put it back on again. I can see, a 4 or 5-year-old losing it during the day, not having a mask later on the bus, or, is the bus driver going to hand out a mask if they lose the mask? I don't know. It's just a little bit confusing. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking this evening.
There are no more raised hands at this time.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Adley, do you want to real quickly, anything you want to add on the bus conversation? I think you went over, it's a federal mandate at this point in time, but my understanding is the bus drivers will have masks. They will ask the children to put masks on. I know it's not the perfect solution, but it is what we're dealing with right now. Anything you want to add to that?
No, it certainly is a current situation that we're dealing with right now. And I certainly respect those comments, because that they're difficult to square up. And I think everybody's recognizing that. Behind the scenes, people are trying to see if we can make some headway into that. And I also respect that I think it was Curtis who spoke about the vacation break, which the medical team did consider at the time too. But thank you for both of those comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Adley. All right, may I have a motion to adjourn? Mr.
Moved.
Smith, second by Mrs. Achman. All those in favor?
Aye.
It is unanimous. Thank you all. Have a very good break, everyone. Be safe.